So think of it from a quality point of view. You have a quality plan, right? If you don't have a quality plan, you can go into something and make mistakes or not have things. And so the whole idea of you want to do as many preventive actions so you have very little.
All right, welcome to another episode of Life Sciences 360. My guest today is John McKay. He is the President, Chief Operating, Quality, and Regulatory Affairs Officer at Q1 Associates LLC. And you're in San Diego, right? Is that correct?
Yes, beautiful San Diego.
Yeah, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Harsh. It's always a pleasure to connect with you. I follow your feeds. I follow everything you do. So it's an honor and a pleasure to meet with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I want to ask first thing to you, I'm in my mid-30s. You have like 35, 40 years. I don't even know, somewhere in that ballpark. So you have as much experience as I've been alive.
As you've been on planet Earth. Yeah. So that, you know what that makes me? A wise Jedi Master who's on the Jedi Council. How about that? Okay?
Yeah, I want to ask you, I know you're one of the few people in my network that has worked in a lot of different countries. In the past, yes. I had another guest on the show who had left US and worked at some life science companies in Europe. And we talked about,
yes.
How he went through that. So personal story, during COVID, a company contacted me from Germany and they were looking for a director of QA role. And the arrangement was like, hey, as long as like COVID is still going, so you can be remote, like you can work from US. But once everything is like open, the borders are open and flying is all fine, we will apply for your visa. And the expectation is that you're going to move with your family to Germany to work here. And I thought about it. I looked at places to rent. I looked at the office location. I looked at all the logistics, but eventually I decided that it wasn't the best thing for my family and, my wife's side of things. So the question I have to ask you is, which was the first role that you took outside of US? And can you walk me through what was going on in your mind? I'm sure you were a little bit scared or nervous of taking something and leaving US and going abroad.
So I was never scared to do that. So I just a little background. I was raised by a person that was in the Army who's in Special Forces, paratroopers, 82nd Airborne, who lived around the world, and raised me with, let's say military good and best practices, with the whole idea that one day you may work in another country. I was actually accepted by the Naval Academy, didn't go. But it was an honor to be accepted by that. So I always had expectations, even as early as high school, that I would be living outside the United States at some point. Had a global view of the world, and had relatives and business professionals that mentored me that were already working all over the world, whether they were in the military, whether they were working for a life sciences company, whether they were having their own export import business. So since like 8th grade, I've been exposed to people on a global basis. I also grew up in an area in Maryland where we had a very diverse community, people from all over the world. We had on a regular basis expats come into our community with their children. And in any day you could have someone from India or from China or from wherever joining your class. You know they were only going to be there for like 3 years. So you kind of work with them, got to know them. And you were enriched by them. At least I was enriched by them. So I had a global worldview as soon as I started my professional career. And I knew that being in chemical engineering, being in quality assurance, regulatory affairs, operational excellence, which is where my areas are, I knew that if I worked for a company large enough, it's probably going to have, at a minimum, suppliers around the world. Certainly could have facilities around the world. So I came into this at a totally different viewpoint than some of my peers, who I would say are very provincial, maybe never have left the state of Maryland. Nothing wrong with them, just a different point of view. We're all different, but have a very provincial, U.S. focused, state focused view versus a global view. So that enters me into why I've worked in 4 countries with 4 expat positions, and why I've done projects in 32 countries, because I sought after those opportunities, as well as those opportunities sought after me. And I was doing it at a time where very few people are willing to do that. Whereas now, post-COVID, people can work from all over the world, especially they can do things remotely. Before COVID, that was almost unheard of. So that's a little background about that. So I've had expat positions in UK, Germany, Brazil, and China, 4 very different countries, different companies, and different responsibilities. But I've done product launches, audits, gap analyses, operational excellence engagements, and let's just say training of third parties like CMOs, CDMOs, CROs, CLOs in 32 different countries. Sure. And so I've been enriched by that because every time you expose to someone, every time you meet someone, they learn from you, you learn from them, and you're enriched. And so I am fully enriched. If you look at, I'm a chemical engineer, so if you look at this from a chemical reaction point of view, my reaction has been enriched by living and working in 4 countries and by doing projects in 32. And by projects, I mean a week to a month in duration. Sometimes a little longer, but projects mostly a week to a month long, whereas the living in countries is for a long time. My most recent experience was in China, which was like living on a different planet in a good way. And we can talk about that. But yeah, it was so much different than the UK, Germany, Brazil. I mean, UK is almost like an extension of the United States. US is a former colony of the UK, so we don't still like to think of it that way, but that's the truth. So it was almost like an extension of the United States. Germany was very different. There's very different types of people in Germany. There's like, just like there's different types of people in the United States, there's like, I would say progressive people in Germany and let's say not so progressive people in Germany, just like there's in the United States. Brazil, it was utopia. I could have died and gone to heaven in Brazil. And then China was second largest economy in the world. 80% of our APIs come from China and India. So you have that experience. And so although I haven't lived in India, I've probably had the most trips to India with the exception of China, as far as just going back and forth doing projects and work with suppliers. I even have a training program that I do on managing suppliers in India and China because that has become very specialized craft, if you will, and specialized systems.
All right. And with all this experience that you had, I wanted to pick on one topic. So working in different countries, obviously there's culture and you still have to get the job done. You still have to get the project goals done. So if, let's say you already worked in so many countries and let's say tomorrow or next week, you're going to a completely new country that you haven't been to on a new assignment. You work in quality, operational excellence. A lot of the things that are done within quality, whether you do it in Egypt or India or US, they stay the same, right? Quality it's not reinvented for every different country. The fundamentals are still the same. It's just how you get the job done and how do you interact with people. So my question to you is, picture this, that you are going to a completely new country that you haven't been to, but you're not scared. You're just happy that you're going there. You're excited. What do you do in the first 2 weeks or 30 days? Do you start reaching out to people at that company from US, or what is it that you do different when you get there so that they welcome you, they include you in that system? Now you're running like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Haj. There's a whole process to that starts 1 to 2 months before you even get on an airplane. And it's something that I've done now 40 times, so I've kind of perfected it. But what happens is it also is something that if you don't do it, there's going to be a lot of unnecessarily trial and error and mistakes, just like any other process. So think of it from a quality point of view. You have a quality plan, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have a quality plan, you can go into something and make mistakes or not have things. And so the whole idea of you want to do as many preventive actions so you have very little corrective actions as far as doing
Interesting.
And so it's a process that I learned a long time ago from a very large global pharmaceutical company that basically had a saying that the sun never sets on this company, meaning we have so many facilities around the world that every hour of every day, someone's working at a facility of ours. And so there were a lot of different opportunities to work and to do that. But they had a process where anyone that was going to go abroad, meaning leaving their home country to another country, basically had to sit through a training course that taught them about the country that they were going to go to, taught them about customs. There's no way there's an expectation to pick up the language all the time, but a few key expressions you want to know, for niceties, for ice breaking, and in particular, information about the customs there, the systems that they have in place, holidays that you may encounter while you're there, because that can affect people attending meetings, what have you. Also information about community events, whether it's for the country or whether the community you're going to, religious events, because again, these can have implications to work. A visit to the U.S. State Department website, because some places just aren't as safe. A lot of people are afraid of the United States. We have some issues here too, but in some places, there may be some issues where you may just want to be aware of things from a travel point of view, from a safety point of view, and then the meat and potatoes of why you're going there, what you have to do, who you have to meet, what your assignment is, and what your goals and objectives are for the visit. And so then this starts one or 2 months before you go. Do you have to get a visa? Do you have to do something else? I remember a colleague of mine from a company I won't mention from Germany showed up in Brazil, did not have a visa because he just in his mind could never imagine that Brazil would want somebody from Germany to have a visa coming there. Well, guess what? They do. So that person was detained for like 3 days, and we were like thinking, I remember scratching our heads like, he kind of didn't listen to the training. We said, make sure you check your visa status and whatever. So that's an idea where 3 days were wasted. He was in a hotel. He was actually in quarantine by the government. They treated him nicely because obviously Germany's done a lot of work with Brazil in the past. But he couldn't leave that hotel until he had an expedited visa, which cost 3 times the normal amount. And it was only because he worked for the company he worked for that they even granted it to him. Otherwise, he just would have been told, you have to go back to Germany. So visa status is very, very important. I'm learning that even for U.S. citizens to go to Europe next year, there's going to be a special privilege or special permission that has to be gotten that was never there. And we can thank a past president for that, whose name I won't mention. But so checking, can you actually get into the country? Are you allowed to get into the country should be the first thing on the list.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, it's the last thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, even if you're not going for business, you're just traveling for fun or tourist, you still want to check.
The first thing you check.
Yeah, can you fly there without any issues?
It even starts sooner than that. Back in the day, I've had people that didn't have a passport, which, okay, nothing wrong with that. Just get a passport. But, some people still don't have a passport, believe it or not. I mean, I grew up as a child with a passport because my parents got us passports. So, yeah, so do you have a passport? With your country, in order to go into another country, do you need a visa? And you showed me a very world-class system the other day when we were talking about a trip I'm having coming up to India. You showed me that. So that website you showed me, as far as I'm being able to plot your country to another country, back in the day, I set it off because I'm working long enough to not even have electronic systems like that. That makes it so much easier. But yeah, you want to prepare yourself. You want to have a process of those, I guess I list off the 8 things, those 8 things that you go through and manage it like a project. Because going to another country, whether you're going to live there, if you want to live there, certain time there's even more you have to do. But if you just want to visit for a week, that's the normal time to go. Then it's a whole process of what you need to do. And it has to start, and I say 2 months ahead of time. If you find out today you have to go to another country, hopefully you have 2 months. But if you don't, you have to do that in an expeditious manner, a fast manner.
Yeah, I haven't been in that situation. I mean, I travel for maybe like a 1 week or 2 week projects. It's never permanent. But what I wanted to ask you more, so let's say you worked in US and then you go and work in maybe a different country. Do you have any like stories or any experiences where
I have a lot of stories
where you've seen a clear difference in the working style? Because I'm curious to learn. So like, for example, in US, there's a set way of working, or there's a set way of wearing business attire to work, or the way you do meetings. So can you talk like maybe in other countries? What was a difference that you saw? Like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. I've never seen this.
Well, so I'm glad you asked that question, because here's what I would advise people: expected differences, because guess what? There are differences, and if you want to assimilate, if you want to be effective, if you want to be seen as a inspired, informed colleague, you need to learn those differences. And now there's the internet. I started when there was no internet. I mean, that's how seasoned I am. Now there's the internet. Now there's places to go, as well as your own company. If you're going to a company facility, that makes it so much easier, because you already have built-in systems of people to connect with, people to get information to. You're not having to go do this on your own. You're not having to rely on, let's say, a supplier to do it. But whoever you're going to go visit, so you're not showing up to a place by yourself. You're going to a facility or an office or whatever. So work with your host. Certainly you have to get an invitation letter, but work with your host to let them know, I'm open to the customs. I'm open to learning what the ways of working. I'm open to learning this. Can you give me a little primer, maybe set up a video meeting, half hour, 30-minute video meeting, or if there's like a visitor package that you have. Many places that receive a lot of audits or gap analyses, like CMOs, CDMOs, they have visitor packages. If you ask for them, they give it to you. Sometimes if you don't ask for it, they forget you don't have it, and they don't give it to you. But ask for the visitor package. And if the visitor package doesn't have everything you need, go from there. But it's on the individual to prepare themselves, because no one knows without asking you if you've been to that country or not. No one knows if you even live in that country. But I have a lot of stories. I mean, countries where I won't necessarily call out specific countries, but I remember working even in the chemical industry, we had a rule where no alcohol was allowed on site. Well, the exception was France. They served wine during the cafeteria for lunch. And, there were a lot of people in the United States were saying, you can't, no, this is France. They're allowed to do it. The people there have one little wine drink, one little sip. They manage alcohol, everything's fine. They're not going to affect anything. No other place in the world was allowed to do that, because it's not a part of the culture. Even other sites in Europe couldn't do it. Italy fought for it. No, that's not your custom. So France, you could have one little wine. They had a white wine, they had a red wine, and they rotated it. They even had a wine cellar. Now there was a wine cellar in German too, but they didn't serve alcohol until after dinner. But that's the custom. Another place where they have, let's call flex time. I won't mention the country again, but if meetings are supposed to start at 10, okay, they may start at 10:05, may start at 10:10, because guess what? People are spending the first 10 minutes on pleasantries, on ice breaking, on how you're doing, how's your family. It's good to see you, John. Haven't seen you in a while. Hey, John's in town. So you have to know that the first 10 minutes are going to be social.
Yeah, I know which country you're talking about, and I had to learn that the hard way when I came to US.
Yeah, but the key about all these is, once you know, just like equality, once you know the root cause, once you know why it's there, then you have a way to embrace it. You have a way to say, okay, that makes sense for them. I see why they do that, and I'm gonna, in order for me to assimilate, I'm gonna have to do that. Now, one should never assimilate into things that makes them feel uncomfortable or is against their religion or against their value system. But most things are, especially in a work environment. If you're going on some tour somewhere, that's maybe different. But in a work environment, there's a band of, let's say, specifications that most companies follow that you can assimilate to the culture within that band of specifications. So you want to learn those things and get to know those things. Another country, they take naps in the afternoon, and I remember, and this is a country I lived in. I'm like, okay, why is everything so quiet from 1 to 2? It's like this. You hear church mouse. Well, I'm walking around, I'm like, people are actually asleep. I'm like, they're allowed to sleep here at the desk like this in the office. Went to the CEO's office. I said, oh, you're awake. He said, yeah, you are not the only ones awake here. You're just because you're not from our country, and I don't have time to take a nap like everyone else. But everyone else, because guess what you couldn't do? Don't schedule a meeting between 1 and 2 because most likely people will be asleep, or they'll come there grouchy saying you're interfering with, they're polite, they won't say it, but they're thinking, this knucklehead is interfering with my nap time.
Right.
And so I called it the nursery time, because it reminded me of like nursery school where you go and all the kids are asleep hey, gotta be quiet, nap time. Man, I didn't tell them this. This was in my mind. I'm thinking, okay, let me creep around quietly, not wake anybody up.
Yeah. And having worked in different countries with different types of quality professionals in all of these countries, what are like 3 non-negotiables from your experience that somebody must have, regardless of where they live, in which country, where they work, if they're in quality, if they're in like reg affairs or operational excellence, the areas that you worked in, what are like the 3 non-negotiable traits that maybe you look for when you're hiring? Yeah.
There's probably 10 non-negotiables, but I'll give 3.
Yeah.
One is the person has to be a disciple and follow exactly all rules, regulations, procedures, systems, because sometimes that can affect their safety or the safety of the product or patient safety. So they have to like be the top person to follow procedures. Matter of fact, I've even seen situations where people were invited to be on a team and like, no, they're not going. Why aren't they going? Because they don't follow procedures. If they don't follow procedures in the United States, they're not going to do it in another country. No, they can't go. Find somebody else.
Yeah.
So you have to follow the procedures. Make sure you have your training up to date, but make sure all your procedures are following. So that's procedures, customs, laws, requirements. You have to follow it. That's probably the number one thing, because one could get in legal trouble if you're not.
That's a good point.
The second thing is you have to be someone that is adaptable. Not a lot of people are adaptable these days. I'm finding they like their certain ways. They like the order. They don't handle change well. So you have to be adaptable, because just the mere fact of getting on an airplane to go to another country is already doing some adaptation, being adaptable, being open to change, being able to handle change, being able to handle different things. And the third thing is you have to be, I would say, an open vessel. And by that, I mean, yes, you're going to bring your own good and best practices with you, but you have to be receptive to what you're going to learn that they have to teach, a different way of doing things, and openness to, well, I've never seen it that way, but let's look at this. Maybe that could work. Okay, show me how that can work. So be an open vessel that people can pour into. If you're not those 3 things, you're not fit for getting on an airplane to leave the United States or any country you're leaving, to go to another country.
Yep, those are really great ones. I think my favorite out of those 3, again, all 3 are great, but my personal favorite is just being adaptive. Like I've seen that in my career when I was open to change or open to new projects or new opportunities. Sometimes people have this idea of they want to know what the change will do to them, right? Like if the change is positive, like, oh, if I get more money, or if I get a bigger title, or if I get an increase in pay, or if I get a boost in my career, only then I'm going to invest in this change. But it's really hard to do that at that moment in time where you don't know how that change is going to pan out. You only know that A, either this could be the worst thing I'll do, or B, this could be the best thing, or C is like the middle ground where, it was good, but I'm not going to do it again, right?
Yeah.
So you always have to...
I agree.
Yeah.
You have to be able to take lemons and make lemonade.
Yep.
Just shortest, simplest answer I can give. There's going to be things that are good. There are going to be things that are not so good. There are going to be things that are favorable, some things slightly unfavorable. You have to have a glass that's half empty. I've been given lemonades. I'm going to make lemonades type of personality and type of outlook so that the overall net is positive for both sides, for you and them, and that you leave them in a better situation than you arrived, and that they're happy to have you come back.
Yep. I agree with you completely. I want to ask you one more question on the reg affairs side, or more specifically about dealing with regulators or dealing with drug enforcement agencies or whichever country you're working in, medical device, food, nutrition.
Right.
When you are going to a new country, let's say whatever it is, and that client or company that you're working for, like let's say we have these requirements in our state, or we have this requirement at a country level. Sometimes you may or may not know those, like FDA, EU, everyone knows those because they're the big ones. But if you're going to some other country where they need your expertise, How do you learn about those things before you interact with that regulatory person or the agency person?
Excellent question. It's under the title of investigative research. So what happens is part of your preparation process. You want to any regulatory agency you're dealing with that's different, any company you're dealing with, or any, let's just say, system, could be an ISO standard, for example, you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You have to do investigative research to learn not only what the requirements are, but to learn what their preferences are, what their emphasis areas are, and what their pinch points are or touch points are. Every agency has that. And so the FDA, EMA, and Visa, other agencies, TGA, they're kind enough to tell ahead of time industry by having conferences, by having webinars, by having discussions, stuff on their website. Not all agencies are. Some agencies, it could be in a different language. So you basically have to work with your partner to ask them, are you aware of what that agency's top priorities are for this year or what their focus areas are? And if they aren't, they can go get that for you. And because not only would it help you, it would help them. Like your colleagues should know that in the foreign country. But you have to do investigative research to do that. And again, this is why I say start 2 months in advance. Sometimes it takes time. It could take several discussions. Some regulatory agencies in certain parts of the world, in certain Asian countries, certain African countries, even South American countries are not as, let's just say, forthcoming with that information. And many times they may never have been asked that question before, so they have to think about it for a minute. So your investigative research may take a little bit of time, whereas in the United States, EU, let's just say the G7 regulatory agencies, that's easy. If you're smart enough to be involved with industry and association meetings, like for right now, for example, there's a PDA FDA meeting going on. I wanted to be there, but I'm helping the client out this week. Meetings like that, or let's say any FDA does periodic training webinars, and so do other agencies. You want to find that out because that's very important, because it's important to know the regulations, but I would say sometimes it's more important to know those priority areas and those emphasis areas because they're coming there loaded to look for that.
Yeah. And if you want to make sure that whatever story you are presenting to them, you have enough objective evidence to line or back up that story, right? Because that's where most companies face a challenge, because in their mind, the quality executive or the C-level executive has a picture of what's happening, but then you get a regulatory person coming in or auditor saying, well, John, you told me this is what's going on, but your data says the other, completely other side of the story. So
exactly. And the agencies want to know three things. They want to know a lot, but it can be boiled down to three things. Are you credible and honest? Do you get it? Meaning, are you up on the regs? Are you up on the priority areas? Do you care enough to be that way? And three, if there are problems, have you demonstrated that you fixed problems in the past so that the current problems they're encountering, you either have discovered them and have a cap in place, or they can rely on you to honestly assess it and honestly fix it in a way that they think it should be fixed. If you can do those three things, the rest is cake.
Yep, I agree. I completely agree with that. Well, I know we're up on time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I had so many questions for you. I think we have to maybe put this out and do a part 2 and a part 3, because I had like 40 questions for you.
I'm here for you.
And
I learned from your questions, so I appreciate your questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we close this out, I really want to thank you for coming on. Do you have where can people connect with you or contact you if they want to pick your brain or get your help on any projects? What's the best way to connect with you?
A piece of metadata that has never changed for me since 1984. 4 countries later, 32 countries later, is my AOL email address. And that's jmckay@aol.com. If you want to find a Jedi Master, find one on the AOL email address, okay? So that they can reach me at that anytime. That's the only metadata that has never changed. Nowadays, you can port your phone and take your number with you, so now that's not changing. But yeah, the jersey I wear may change. The where I'm at may change. I may be all over the world, but you can always reach me by that email address.
Great. And any concluding or final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yes. I would say, the world is truly global. I mean, it's been global since the 80s, but it's really global now. And then post-COVID, we as professionals can work remotely because it's accepted a lot more. Before COVID, a lot of companies were already doing that. But post-COVID, one can work from anywhere for anyone in the world and then travel to those locations periodically. And so the old saying, the world is your oyster, is more true today than it ever has been, as well as not everyone wants to work outside the United States. Fortunately, the United States, the largest economy in the world, and there's plenty of opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities, but you know what? Go to another state. I know some people that never have left their state. Okay, you can leave Pennsylvania, you can leave Maryland. There's other action elsewhere. So one can have foreign experiences right here in the United States because these states are very different too.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I lived on the East Coast, West Coast, and just that is a lot of difference. Yeah.
I grew up on the East Coast. I live on the West Coast now. I lived in Middle Tennessee for many years. It's three different countries. It really is.
Yeah.
And that's fun. I mean, I find that fun. I find it exciting. I find it refreshing, and I welcome it. And for those that don't want to, no worries. Be skilled in your area you want to stay in your geographic area or function or whatever. Just continue to progress and be better. So the word for everyone is continual improvement.
All right. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it. And you have a great week ahead.
You do the same, Lars. Thank you very much.